I've been coming to this, I think, since the very first one. I was a good friend of Elmer Kelton's, and I've known Terry Dalrymple and Chris Ellery, oh gosh, for almost 40 years. We've been good friends. They asked me to come out from time to time. I came out last year and was on the program, did a reading. This year, they just invited me to come out, and they said they might work me into the program because they've had a cancellation, but I'm not on the program officially this year. I more or less came out because I could, and I wanted to visit with them. I haven't seen them in about a year, and it was an opportunity to sort of renew acquaintances with some people. Carol Raposa is one person I've known for a long time, about 37 years, and I've also known, I know several of the readers who are on the program for a long time.
If you wanted to give us a brief overview of your literary career.
Well, I was trained as a scholar. I have a doctoral degree from University of Tulsa. I've taught in 5 or 6 different universities over the course of my 45 years of higher education before I retired. I started writing novels, fiction, sort of by accident around the mid-1980s. I was just sort of trying it to see if I could get it to work because I had small children at home. My wife worked nights. I took care of them. I couldn't go to the library, so I just started writing. I got lucky and published a couple of novels. I've now written 20 books. 10 of them are fiction. One is a collection of short fiction. The others are novels. I've won some fairly substantial awards, not anything really great. I was a nominee for a Pulitzer in 1992, but I didn't get it. And nobody remembers really who won them, let alone who didn't. I've won a couple of Violet Crown Awards for my novels, and I've won Spur Awards for my short fiction. A number of awards have come my way, which have been very gratifying. My first novel was published in New York by St. Martin's Press in 1986, and my phone's ringing, which I apologize for that. Just cut that off. I didn't expect that to happen. And junk call probably. My second novel came out at the end of that next year, 1987. And then I published the others over the course of the 1990s. And Franklin's Crossing was the novel that was nominated for the Pulitzer Prize in 1992 publication. And it also won Violet Crown, and then let's see, Monuments won a Violet Crown as well. And I enjoy writing. I write as often as I can. Academics became a kind of impediment to my writing. It got in the way a good deal because I was directing the program, not just teaching. And it was all-consuming in a lot of ways. So I sort of had that to deal with, and haven't done a lot of long projects or serious projects in some time. I've written probably just over 1,200 pieces, published about 1,200 pieces of work, but a good deal of that is literary criticism as well as essays, opinion editorials. I do sort of some journalism on the side. I do some editorial consulting as well. So I stayed active and tried to do something, be involved in something most all the time. But here in the last several years, it's been very difficult to do. So I kind of decided as long as I had my health and my desire to write, I would bow out of my day job, so to speak, and take advantage of my retirement so I can focus more on my writing here out. Well, I think there are 2 or 3 things that are important to know. One is you don't need a degree to be a writer. You don't need a certification. You can't get a license for it. You can't apply to do it. You just have to do it. That's the first thing. It's most of the great writers, both in past and present, have very minimal educational backgrounds, although they are very well-educated people. They're largely by and large self-educated, which leads me to the second point. The most important thing a writer can do is read. You cannot read enough, and you cannot read widely enough, and you cannot read sufficiently enough. You should read something all the time. I probably average a book a week. When I was working full-time, I did a book a week. Now that I'm not working full-time, I probably will knock off 2 or 3 a week. I read everything. I read history. The one thing that a lot of writers make a mistake about is they think they want to write it. They don't know what to write about, and writers don't write about writing. They write about everything else, and so the more you know about everything else, the better off you are. So I read history, I read science, I read anthropology, I read whatever interests me, and I also read a lot of canonical fiction, because it's important to know what's been written before, and so you don't reinvent the wheel constantly. And the third thing is, I think, to have a sense of the language. You need to know the language. You need to know the English language. Grammar, mechanics are vitally important. Creative writing is not creative license. You don't have the ability to manipulate language and use punctuation and capitalization and other marks of punctuation as you wish. You have to follow the rules of the road. And if you break them, they have to be broken deliberately and for a purpose, not simply because you're ignorant or that you appear to be ignorant. So I break them all the time, but I break them on purpose. And I've spent a lot of my time as a student learning grammar, rhetoric, studying those topics that students hate to study when they're in college in particular. They're vitally, vitally important. I often tell people, if you don't know how to use a semicolon, then you probably will never be a writer. And I, by the way, never use semicolons in dialogue, because I don't know anyone who speaks in semicolons, and I never want to. So that's sort of my advice to writers, is learn to use the things you have, your tools you have. It is your tool. And like if you're a carpenter or a mechanic, you can't walk into a workshop and not know the difference between a wrench and a saw and expect to get anything done. And you also need to know the difference between woods and metals and all those things that you're going to work with. Well, writers need to know their language, and they need to know the body of work that has gone before. So familiarize yourself with your craft before you try to become a part of that. A lot of people talk about art. I don't think art is something you can ever learn. No one tries to create art. Deliberate creation of art is a waste of time. Art is decided upon, whether something's artistic or not, is decided upon by other people who look at it and make that decision. And I think that that's a big mistake. Once I was asked, I think it was during a job interview for an academic position, why do you write? I said, I write to make money. And they looked at me rather astonished, and I said, well, Samuel Johnson once said that none but a blockhead ever wrote but for money. And most writers write for money. Otherwise, it's all ego. And writing for ego is, well, it's gratifying perhaps for a while, but it also bores your friends, burdens your family, and gives you very little satisfaction. It's knowing that a total stranger reads your work and appreciates it that makes it worthwhile. I think it allows me to look at anything, a landscape, a town, a group of people, whether they're in an airport or simply walking down the street or standing right here in a university center, and make observations that will be useful in a creative way at some point. And I stockpile those. I sometimes take notes on them. I think it makes you appreciative of the ebb and flow of life and the relationships we have with each other. Writing fiction in particular is about relationships. It's about the interaction among people, and it's also about the
Morning, Doc.
Good morning, sir. It's also about the strains and emotional highs and lows of that. And those stresses, those strains, those dynamics are what I think writers become hypersensitive to. And also, I think it can create problems for you too, because you become sort of overly sensitive to what people say and do, and you can become perhaps a little overreactive to those things. But it's a lonely profession. It's a solo profession. And gatherings like this are nice, they're social, but they don't really help you as a writer. The main thing that you can do is sit down and write, and try your craft. Bertrand Russell, I think it was, who said, if you ever write a sentence you really like, cut it out. If if you ever write something you think is really funny, don't use it, because humor quality comes from other people's delight in it, not from your own satisfaction in doing it. So I think that's a big part of it. Kurt Vonnegut once said, "Never write anything that is so absurdly correct that it offends." And I think that's also good advice. But I do believe that being a writer has given me a perspective on life and on people, and I'm always thinking about writing. Driving out here, I grew up in West Texas, north of here a good deal, but I grew up in West Texas and always liked driving out. I live near Dallas, and driving out to this part of the country always inspires me to think about the people who came out here, the people who settled this place, the people who were here before that, and I look at the vegetation and the trees and the mountains and the scrub and the hard scrabble, and I think about this place in a different way from perhaps someone just zipping by and eager to get somewhere.